As Reo, Frin, and Rena stood at the dungeon entrance, Reo couldn't help but notice the look of determination on Rena's face. It was as if she had something to prove, though Reo didn't question it. Together, they stepped into the dungeon, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The first floor was populated by venomous ants, large, aggressive creatures whose venom could incapacitate weaker opponents. Rena stepped forward, her bow in hand. Reo noticed she wasn't carrying any arrows, but before he could ask, she drew back her bowstring, and an arrow materialized out of thin air. It shot forward, striking down the first ant with precision. The other ants noticed the attack and charged, but Rena was ready. She drew back her bowstring again, and this time, a flurry of arrows rained down, dispatching the remaining ants in seconds. She glanced back at Reo, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Time to go," she said, as if letting him know she could handle tight spaces just fine. The next few floors were equally uneventful, with Rena making quick work of the weak monsters. Reo and Frin followed behind, observing her skill and efficiency. By the time they reached the fifth floor, Rena seemed confident in her abilities, until they encountered the first sub-boss. The fifth floor was dominated by a massive orc, its hulking form towering over them. Rena stepped forward, ready to take it on. "Don't worry, I'll handle this," she said. Reo smirked. "Maybe I should stretch my muscles a bit. Can't have you having all the fun." Before Rena could protest, Reo stepped forward and muttered, "Fireball." A massive fireball shot from his hand, striking the orc and reducing it to ashes in an instant. Rena stared in shock, her bow lowering slightly. "What are you?" she muttered under her breath. Reo shrugged. "Don't worry too much about me. I can hold my own." He then walked over to where the orc had fallen and picked up a large purple orb, a monster core. "This should fetch a good price," he said, showing it to Rena. "We'll split the money when we get back." Rena nodded, still processing what she had just witnessed. On the sixth floor, Frin communicated with Reo, asking if he could take on the monsters. Reo agreed and let Rena know that Frin would be stepping up. Rena watched in awe as the Fenrir made quick work of the monsters, his ice spears tearing through them with ease. The two continued to wreak havoc on the next floors, leaving Rena to wonder if they were the real monsters. By the time they reached the ninth floor, Rena was determined not to be outshone again. The floor was filled with slimes, and she stepped forward, ready to prove herself. But as she fired an arrow at one of the slimes, Reo noticed something was off. "Why are there only slimes on the ninth floor?" he thought. Just then, the arrow struck the slime, and it exploded on impact, sending pieces flying in all directions. Reo's instincts kicked in as he noticed the slime fragments flying toward them. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Rena and pulling her out of harm's way. The fragments exploded again, the force strong enough to cause serious damage. Rena's confidence wavered for a moment, but Reo gave Frin the signal. The Fenrir howled, stomping his front legs on the ground and freezing all the slimes in place. The ice then caved in, triggering the explosions but containing them safely. Rena stared in awe, realizing just how powerful her companions were. The 10th floor was unlike the others. Instead of a single boss, they were met with an army of orcs. Reo wasted no time, firing fireballs into the crowd and taking down several orcs at once. But as the defeated orcs dissolved, circles appeared on the ground, and more orcs emerged, seemingly endless. Frin stepped in, freezing the floor and trapping the orcs in ice. As the ice caved in, they noticed one orc remained unaffected, the boss. It was larger and more menacing than the others. Reo fired a spell at it, but the boss broke free of the ice with ease, deflecting Reo's spells with the back of its hand. The boss summoned more orcs, some armed with clubs and others with bows. The club-wielding orcs charged, while the archers fired arrows. Frin, already knowing what to do, erected an ice wall to block the arrows, while Rena retaliated with her own barrage. Reo drew his sword and charged at the boss, his movements wild and unpredictable. Reo was about to deliver a devastating blow, but the boss summoned another orc to take the damage. The boss then tried to strike back, but Reo backed off and vanished into the crowd of orcs, reappearing from behind for another attempt. The boss tried to summon more orcs to protect itself, but Friend froze its hands, preventing it from casting. Reo was about to strike a devastating blow when he noticed a volley of arrows heading his way. He managed to dodge, but the boss roared, summoning even more orcs to its aid. Rena wasn't going to let that happen. She fired a barrage of arrows, taking out the archers, while Friend dealt with the club-wielding orcs. The boss, now furious, looked around frantically, trying to locate Reo. But Reo was already above him, leaping from the ceiling before driving his sword through the boss's head, finally defeating it. As the boss dissolved, they noticed the item drop, a combat club, too heavy and brutish for any of them to carry. They decided to leave it behind and pick it up on their way back. Nearby, they found a treasure chest filled with gold and a weapon enhancer. Reo handed the enhancer to Rena. "This should make your bow more powerful," he said. Rena hesitated. "Are you sure? You could use it too." Reo shook his head. "I've got my sword and magic. This will help you more." She accepted and used the enhancer on her bow, which now glowed faintly with newfound power. Friend then communicated with Reo, expressing his desire to enhance Rena's bow further. Reo relayed this to Rena, and she agreed, handing the bow to Friend. The Fenrir placed a paw on the bow, and it shimmered with icy energy. "Friend has given your bow the ability to fire ice arrows," Reo explained. "They can freeze some targets temporarily once they penetrate through." Rena tested the bow, firing an arrow that froze a nearby rock solid. She smiled, a rare expression of gratitude. "Thank you, Friend. And you, Reo." With the first 10 levels of the dungeon cleared, they decided to leave the gold behind for now, planning to retrieve it on their way back. As they prepared to descend further, Rena couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for her companions. Reo, meanwhile, was already thinking about the challenges that lay ahead.